All right, folks, welcome to the Monsters, Madness, and Magic podcast. I'm your host, Justin, here with a quick word before we dive in. Now, in this episode, I chat with actor and comedian Bill Farmer about voicing Goofy for the last 40 years, getting his start doing stand up, Universal Monster movies, being killed in a horror movie, his cameo in RoboCop, and more. As always, thank you all for listening out there. And without further ado, here you go. Well, Bill, why don't you just take us back in time to start here? You're a youngster. Are you a book reader, fort builder, troublemaker, or all the above?
Probably all of the above, depending on who you ask.
What kind of trouble are we talking about?
Oh, God. I was always one of those kids. I've got ADD, so I was always getting in trouble fifth grade. I would spend half the year in detention, it seemed like, because, Bill, don't look out the window, pay attention. And I was thinking about monsters or cartoon characters or whatever. But I was that kind of kid.
Well, you said all the above. Did you have any genres of books that you like to read? Maybe a specific author or anything like that growing up?
I was more of a, rather than novel, I was more into kind of science. So science books, magazines, kind of reality things. I spent several years as a DJ in radio stations as well as the chief engineer. So I had a background in electronics. I always did a little model kits and things like that, painting model kits as well as electronic kits, working with making radios and Tesla coils and things like that.
Wow. You mentioned monsters. Were you building the I think they were, I can't remember the exact name of them, but they were the monster models, the famous monsters of filmland, I think it was. Did you ever tinker with those?
Yeah, let's see if I probably have a couple right here. They're all over the house. I don't know. I think I've got the mummy right here. These are the type of models that this is from, of course, the more recent mummy, and everything. So these kind of models are what I spent a lot of my youth creating, as well as electronic kits, and I'll put lights in those kind of things around Halloween. Halloween's really big around here, and so I try and use all of my talents to bring it together.
So were you a fan of the Universal monster movies growing
Oh,
up?
absolutely, absolutely. Frankenstein, especially, kind of grabbed my heart pretty early. I saw it on TV, and he really got to me. And later on, I've been to uh, some Comic Cons and things like that. Got to meet Sarah Karloff and Bela Lugosi Jr. and Vincent Price's daughter. And that's always a big thrill because they were my gods on the screen. I love those kind of movies.
Yeah, I love Vincent Price myself. Just whereabouts did you grow up? Did you grow up in LA?
No, no, South Central Kansas,
Mm.
actually, little town Pratt, Kansas, about 70 miles west of Wichita. We had wheat and tornadoes. That's basically what we had there. So it was a great place to imagine because there wasn't a whole lot going on in a sleepy little Midwest Kansas town.
Yeah, every time someone mentions Kansas, all I think of is the Wizard of Oz. That's my
Yeah,
image
yeah,
of
we had to
Kansas in my
memorize,
head.
I think, the movie. Yes, we had, and I think I used to think it was true. You hit the state line, everything goes to black and white. You know,
So we're mentioning monster movies and stuff, but when you think back generally to films and TV shows that you grew up on, what comes to mind?
oh my gosh. Well, I'm old enough. I just had my 72nd birthday here about a week ago. So yes, I'm definitely an old man now. But I grew up with, of course, Twilight Zone was one of my favorites. I remember that on Thursday nights, and I mean when it was first run, and it was wild. Lost in Space. I was around for that one too, and I got to meet Billy Mummy. Or Moomy later on. Just a lot of anything that was sci-fi, Star Trek, of course. Any of those kind of things were in my genre, especially Twilight Zone.
Hmm. Do you have a favorite episode?
Oh gosh, there are so many. Of course, the one, who is it? Played the penguin. Burgess Meredith.
Yeah, yeah.
But of course, when he goes into he needed the time to read books, and he got a lot of time when the world went away. So,
That's a good one. I think my personal favorite is The Howling Man. I don't know if you remember that
yes,
one. Yeah,
yeah,
with the Hermitage. That's a great episode.
that is great. And yes, he was the devil. So,
Yeah. A question I like to ask everybody is, what scared you as a kid? And you can take it whichever direction you want to go with it.
well, as I say, Frankenstein was the first one I remember. I probably saw that movie on TV about when I was, 4 or 5. I think that's why later on I built a Tesla coil just to emulate all the jumping electric sparks. And for some reason, he kind of terrified me. Yeah, more so than Dracula or the Wolfman. Yeah, probably Frankenstein was the one that did. And much later, paranormal in the more recent movies, although it's not that recent right now. That really got me in the theaters. That was an
Par-
amazing movie.
Paranormal Activity.
Yes, yes.
Oh man, preaching to the
Yeah.
choir. Yeah, I remember staying up all night after seeing that. Just had the lights on.
And I mean, and being in Hollywood and knowing the behind the scenes stuff of film production, that the fact that they made that on such a small budget in a house, I believe, down somewhere near San Diego. I mean, that's an incredible, incredible feat. And to get a movie like that is just, astronomical, the odds against that.
Yeah, no special effects, really nothing going on like big
No,
budget wise. Just
it was tension. It was what a horror film should be, building that tension, not necessarily, a splatter movie or lots of gore, just wow, just deep down mental horror.
so was there anyone else in your family that was maybe artistically or creatively inclined? Do you think that's where your roots come from?
Well, my son is, but no, matter of fact, my mom and dad were pretty much kind of quote normal Midwest family there. Why are you watching that? That's horrible. Oh, look at that. And that was back in the days where it wasn't really gory or anything. So, no, I'm the only one. I was the outcast. I was kind of the different kid in school, even more so than my friends, who they also loved horror movies, especially one friend named Steve. He loved horror movies as well. So we kind of used to go to the theater, our little one theater in that town. They'd come around in May and sell you a whole bag of tickets for every day during the summer. They'd show a double feature with the Three Stooges, a few cartoons as well. We spent our summers doing that, and a lot of them were the 50s horror films, them, I'll tell you another one that scared me, The Thing.
Mm.
John Carpenter's The Thing. That is a great top 5 movie.
Yeah, John Carpenter, master of horror. That's his nickname.
Yeah.
Would you classify yourself as a theater kid? Were you interested in on being on stage or the arts or anything like that?
There was no outlet. I always loved Hollywood, and my all I had was TV and the movies. So that to me was Hollywood. I'd never seen a play really. Introduction to, I guess, stage work, even though I was behind a microphone in a studio. I lived later on in Dallas, Texas, where I got into stand-up comedy, which was my introduction to stage work, even though it's pretty much solo. And I did that for about 5 years before coming out to Hollywood. And seeing what I could do out here, and that was 37 years ago, and still still doing a lot of cartoon voices and occasionally a movie, but not too often.
So how early on did you realize that you could emulate voices and stuff like that? Were you just always entertaining your friends?
Oh yes, yeah. When I was, a teenager, I would, and we got old enough to drive. We'd go through things like McDonald's, and they'd say, "Do a weird voice that I was known for," and I'd, give me a Scotch and soda, would you, sir? And they'd laugh and everything, and my friends thought that was cool. And of course, the old movie stars like John Wayne, and they had a lot of westerns in those days, so I just naturally start doing the voice. And of course, then they put me up in high school at pep assemblies when we would have a football game, and do John Wayne, do Jimmy Stewart, do any of the other voices, and it just became. I got pushed into it. Really, I was a pretty shy kid, but I got pushed into it fairly early, and I figured, this is kind of fun. People seem to like this.
Was it stand up first or radio?
Radio first. Yeah, I did that right after college. I was at a college radio station, University of Kansas, and started in radio after that in my hometown in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Kind of wound up down in that. Finally got out of that. There was no money in it. And actually, I went back to school to learn electronics because I knew just enough electronics to get a first class FCC license. So I became the
Mm.
chief engineer. But then you'd get the manual for the transmitter and it said, caution, death on contact with these points. I need to learn about this or I'm getting some big trouble. So I went back to Dallas for a 9 month, 5 hour a day course. Basically, it's kind of like one of those DeVry Institute things. I'm trying to even, Elkins Institute of Technology, actually. And so I did a 9 month course, got an equivalent of an associate's degree in electronics. So I felt a little bit better about not electrocuting myself in radio. Did that, and later on even became an electronic technician for about 3 years as I was trying to get my commercial and stage acting yeah, acting career going in Dallas. And then just kind of jumped off the end of the boat into the big abyss and moved to Hollywood to see what would happen.
So growing up, were you a fan of radio dramas or any disc jockeys in particular?
Yes, yeah. As a matter of fact, the first thing I ever did on radio was me and my friend Steve to go out to our radio station, and they allowed us to do radio drama. And Arch Obler, what was it? He had a 78 record of horror stories, and we wrote our own horror story about some guy getting trapped in a house and the walls come crashing into him and what they say in that last few minutes. So we had like bricks that we were grinding against each other for sound, did our own Foley. And that was really, I guess, the first time that we actually did a little radio play, and it was a horror one. Yeah. I haven't
That's
thought about
hilarious.
it in years and years.
It's just this is cool because initially I reached out and I spoke with Austin about setting up an interview with you, and he mentioned seeing my guest list that he was a big fan of horror movies. So I guess that's where it comes from the dad.
Yes, I'm very proud of him.
So you raised him on horror movies, I take it.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, he does a podcast, the name of which is escaping me right now. And so they talk about horror movies. And so he's kind of my, guide to what's good. Oh, this is coming out. Let's go see that. And because, I don't keep up with it as much as I should now, but I still like going with him.
I
I think the last one we saw together was The Substance.
haven't seen that one.
That's that's an interesting one. Yeah, very kind of wild.
What records were spinning around the house when you were growing up? Did you play
Oh
an
yeah.
instrument
Well,
or?
yeah. I did saxophone in high school. Not very well. My son's a professional drummer, so yeah. Everyone else, and my wife has a degree in piano, but I'm the one for Disney as the voice of Goofy. I get to sing a lot on albums, and so I'm the only one with the gold record on the wall. So.
So first time on stage as a performer, I'm assuming that was stand up. How did it go? Was it smooth?
Actually, the first one was at a place called the Comedy Corner in Dallas, Texas. I can give you the date. It was January 23rd of no, this that was my first Goofy performance. March 17th of 1982. And it was just one of those things where you could go up and do 5 minutes of comedy and sign up. And I said, I've always wanted to do that. If I don't try it, I'm going to kick myself when I'm old. And I went up, and the host of that comedy corner was a guy who went on to great fame, Bill Engvall,
Mm.
and he was part of the like comedy, the country comedy thing with Jeff Foxworthy, Larry the Cable Guy. done, and he was the first one that said, I did impressions basically. And he was the first one that really said, I think you got something. You ought to at least try and do this. So I came back week after week and kind of got better and learned and how to do that. And then went on the road within like 6, 7 months to different clubs around Texas, Louisiana, that area, and did that for about 4 or 5 years before jumping to California.
What were some of the impressions that you like to use on stage?
Well, of course, there was the old thing. I would do the opening for Rod Serling in the Twilight Zone, and of course, well, like I did John Wayne and Walter Brennan and Gore doing it too. Some of them other ones, like Pat Buttram's one of my favorites. Got to work with him on a Goofy movie. And of course a lot of the actors from that time, like Jimmy Stewart, I'd do routines, and it turned out okay.
So I take it stage fright was never an issue for you.
Oh, it was.
Mm.
Oh, it is. It still is to a degree. I was very fortunate just in July for a Disney movie from the 80s and 90s. I got to sing on stage at the Hollywood Bowl, and they had a crowd of like 17,500 for 2 nights, and I was singing a song from a Goofy movie. And yes, that's called stage fright. Yes, yes, it'll get to you. Even though I did 5 years of stand up, yeah, that can come back to you, that stage fright.
And before we get the the transition to Hollywood and Disney, Bill, I know you do some teaching, vocal coaching and acting coaching.
Yes.
So what would you say is the a typical pitfall that you see young actors or voice actors fall into?
Yeah, they think of it as voice acting with the emphasis on the voice. It's really not. It's voice acting, emphasis on the acting ability. When I came to California, I took classes from a guy named Dawes Butler, who was a great voiceover talent, did a lot of the Hanna-Barbera characters, Yogi Bear, Huckleberry Hound, Snagglepuss, Captain Crunch, dozens and dozens of others. And he was the one that really instilled in us that it is acting, whether there's a camera there, just a microphone on stage, different techniques, but it is all acting. And that is what you should study the most, because a regular voice with good acting behind it will go farther than a great voice that it's just hollow. It's not real. It doesn't become real to the audience.
Well said. So what is the transition, the official transition from stand up to now you're in LA? Was Goofy the first time you're in the voice booth?
Oh no, I had done a couple of impressions and a couple of commercials, but he was really, as far as I can remember, the first really big audition that, and I didn't realize it as such. I knew Goofy was my favorite Disney character, and gosh, I'd done him for a long time, just playing around with it. I didn't use him in my stand-up routine, but I didn't do any animated characters at that time on stage, and I just got a cassette of the original voice, Pinto Colvig, studied it over a weekend, and laid it down. And about a month later, they said they'd like to use me for one show called Disney's Doggone Valentine, where I was doing one line looping an old Goofy cartoon. Oh, that terrified me too, because I'd never been in a big studio like this. I'd never, wow, this is kind of the big time. And I didn't know at the time. I found out later that there were 1,100 other people being considered and looked at that put in auditions for that same role. If I'd known those odds, I probably wouldn't have tried it. So ignorance was bliss in my regard. And they used me once, and they don't sign you to a long-term contract or anything. It's just for that one job. And it's that way now. It still is. We're all independent contractors. I'm not a Disney employee, never have been. So I've done work for Warner Brothers, Paramount, Universal, all the other studios as well over the years. But Goofy has been that one great character that has been solid since 1987. Did a couple of cartoons last week for it. So he's the
Wow.
one that has had this long longevity, and they're still doing stuff for him. So we got a couple of Christmas, Halloween things. On Christmas Day, there's a thing, and I can't even remember which NBA game it is, but it's on ESPN 2 and 4 and Disney Plus, where we're doing live commentary, but I've already recorded it, but it will be done live. And normally it takes like a year to animate something. This is like instantaneous. I'm looking forward to finding out what it is. I don't even know what it is, but we're doing something on Christmas Day, and we've got. I think I'm doing something in the Rose Bowl parade on Thanksgiving Day. There's a Disney float. I'm doing a few voices on that. So yeah, they keep me going. It's so much fun. And I do most of my cartoons and other shows right from this room. This is in my little studio in my house, which we started using during COVID.
Mm.
And still to this day, my son's an engineer, engineers my sessions. We do it right in here. And you can see Goofy over there in the corner and everything, kind of give me the okay, that's who I'm doing. So
So, you say you're a fan of Goofy growing up, and you officially get the job, and then you start becoming Goofy more and more often. Was there a moment where you're like, holy crap? Or you had to pinch yourself, I
oh yeah.
guess?
Yeah, well, the big holy crap moment was probably when I got a series called Goof Troop in around 1989, 90. That was for me, okay, I think I can make a living doing this because before it was like a job every month or so, didn't pay the bills. A series can. And that kind of took off. And following that, a Goofy movie came out, probably the most popular thing I've ever done according to fans, which is still popular here 29 years after it came out. And there's even a documentary coming out on its 30th anniversary or roughly around there called Not Just a Goof on the making of a Goofy movie. So they're still doing stuff. It's more popular now than it was then. Not too many movies do that. And then I really realized, okay, here's a movie I can go in a movie theater and hear me perform in front of an audience. That's when, yeah, it really hit.
Yeah, and just speaking of the sports aspect of it, you were also involved in Space Jam, which was one of a kind and
Yes,
during
it
its
was.
time.
Yeah. And I'd met Mel Blanc shortly before he passed away, I think, doing Roger Rabbit. He, of course, was my idol. I mean, he's the only guy that we knew who did the cartoon voices because they'd have his name in the credits. Generally, they don't, or they went by so fast in those days. And who did that? Who did that? You couldn't find out. No internet, no way to back up the tape or anything like that. So we had to just we knew Mel Blanc though, and so he was kind of the number one voice actor to most people that love that kind of stuff.
Obviously, most of your work for Space Jam was in the booth, but did you get a chance to meet Michael Jordan?
Just very briefly at a premiere, just less than a minute. But just hi. So we didn't get to work with him. We're doing the animation totally separate from the live action stuff. Most people don't realize we aren't watching a movie and adding voices to it. We're doing it right off of a script. Then they animate it. And so we don't know what the final product's going to be until we see it on TV or in the movie theater.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you were doing Foghorn Leghorn in Space
And
Jam,
and Sylvester, yeah.
Sylvester. Did you get asked if you could do those voices, or did you just throw it out there? I can also do
Oh
X,
yeah.
X, and X.
Actually, yeah. Foghorn. The guy I didn't start as Foghorn on that movie. I took it over from a guy who couldn't continue, and I forgot what the reason was. And so that was just an audition right there in the studio. Ivan Reitman was the producer of the movie, also the animation director, and he's, "Can you do Foghorn?" I say that boy. That boy's about as sharp as a bowling ball. Okay, you're it. It was as simple as that. And because I was already doing Sylvester that I had to go through the long audition process for. And Yosemite Sam, too, which is rough on the voice if you do it this early in the morning when you just have your coffee. So
Yeah.
I hate rabbits, that kind of thing. So
Just speaking of difficult voices, what would you say is the most challenging voice on the vocal cords?
that probably that. Even Mel Blanc didn't do that in Space Jam. And that was one of his voices because of his age. And he was a heavy smoker, and as I remember, he was also on an oxygen tank. So,
Wow.
like you take a hit of oxygen and then a puff on a cigarette. I mean, not the greatest thing for your throat, but Yosemite was the one he didn't do in that movie. I think it's just because too
Hmm.
rough.
Just backing up a little bit, I want to ask you about one of your own screen roles, which was Justin Watkins in RoboCop.
Yes, yeah. Justin Ballard Watkins was the name of that, who was the screenwriter's cousin's name, and where that name came from. That was in Dallas, actually. That was even before I moved out to California and did the audition for Goofy. That was just an open call. They wanted a newscaster, and Verhoeven, the director, was there, and he liked what I had done, and they just called me up, and what I remember about, I did three scenes, one of which was deleted because it was an alternate ending to the movie. And so the other two, as an on the street reporter, were in the movie. And as I remember, we were going through a big heat wave in Dallas. And I shot about 1 in the morning downtown, and it was about 96 degrees. And Peter Weller in the RoboCop outfit was just dying. A couple of years ago, I ran into him at a Comic Con, and I showed him a picture of me from RoboCop, and he said, "Do you remember that?" And he said, "Oh yeah, it was hot as hell." They were blowing air up his sleeve after every take just to keep him from fainting because it was like a wetsuit underneath this armor that he had. Very hot, very hot. And he couldn't take the helmet off or anything between takes. He was stuck in that all night long.
So once things get rolling for you with Goofy and doing all the voices, did your want to work on camera, did it just kind of dissipate and you just focus solely on that?
No, I still do occasional little films. I did actually, it was a horror film about 2 or 3 years ago called Desert Shadows up in Reno, because I knew some people up there, and they asked if I wanted to be as an extra. It really wasn't a paid part, and I just did it because they did pay what, just Screen Actors Guild demands, but it was a minimum payment thing. I did it for the love of it, and I said, okay, is there a way that I can get killed by the monster? I always wanted to be killed by the monster in a movie. And yeah. So I get impaled by an arm, which was great fun to do because they had this bloody hand that I'm kind of holding in on my chest here. And under my arm, they had this PVC pipe full of like chicken guts and fake blood and everything. Then they loaded my mouth up with fake blood. And you get one take at this because they put everything, a tarp over everything because it's going to be messy. And so I get like the monster basically rips this guy's arm off of it and jams it through me. So it's kind of a dark comedy kind of thing. And so then they hit it, and then they bloom with all the guts flying out. And then I got to go "Bleh," and blow the blood out and then just fall out of frame. And it was shot very fast. It was like 300 frames a second. So it's like very, it looks very almost like a ballet a little bit. And you see, if you see the full thing, it takes like 4 or 5 minutes, and you see the blood dripping down and as you fall out of frame. And we got it on one take. And that was a great deal of fun. I love doing that kind of thing.
That's hilarious. So, do you still do stand up?
Rarely. I speak once in a while at a university, and I use some of my comedy in panels that I do at mostly Comic Cons these days. But I haven't done an actual club in a couple of years where my son Austin actually got to go up and try comedy for the first time, and then I went on stage, Flappers Comedy Club here in Los Angeles, and it's kind of like, yeah, riding a bike. You kind of remember how to do it, even though it had been years and years since I'd been on stage at a comedy club.
So, would you say it's more difficult for you as an actor to mimic an already established voice or to create a new voice for a new character?
It's harder to do an established voice because there's a footprint that you're kind of following. I did a show a few years ago called Amphibia, where I do a character named Hop Pop. And I got to come up with that voice. I just got a picture of him and what would this guy sound like? And you kind of come up with ideas, and they liked mine. But Goofy has been around since 1932 and well established, well known. And so stepping into that was more difficult than creating your own because there's no right or wrong. It is what it is. And it's either works for that character or it doesn't. But Goofy, you've got to sound like him. You've got to emote like him. You got to get him to so that, his words sound like Goofy's words.
Right. And obviously you did a great job. I mean, you're still doing it all these years later, but was there ever a time where they told you to, a little adjustment here, you need more
Oh,
here,
every
less here?
every uh, every project really has an adjustment. A Goofy movie had the biggest adjustment because he had to be worried about his son Max. He had to be kind of worried and a lot of emotions that we really hadn't had to do before. Goof Troop was kind of a high Saturday morning, high energy kind of vibe. Goofy Movie was this road trip, so it was very personal with him and Max. And you don't want to lose Goofy by going too human, but you want to add those layers to the character and just kind of make it sound real. That was the hardest part of doing that. And if you see this documentary that comes up called Not Just a Goof, they came to me and they actually wanted me to try Goofy in my own voice. They said, well, maybe we'll try and make him a real person. They were not playing by, we got to do it like this. And yeah, I did several days of recording in my own voice, and I thought, oh, this is terrible. Don't people want to hear Goofy when they're seeing a Goofy movie? No, no, it's like hi Max instead of howdy Max. There's a big difference there. And they, after a few days, figured, yeah, that doesn't work. So I went back and got to re-record everything, and it came out to be a really good movie and a kind of a different style for Goofy. Everything that Mickey Mouse shorts, which has a different style altogether, and the way they look, it's more 1930s look, and we can do more adult stuff and not as much kid oriented material as we had before. That has a different vibe too. Every project seems to have kind of its own vibe, and you get into the groove of what that show's all about, and it just kind of you find it, and then okay, this feels right,
Mm.
and if it all clicks, it clicks.
So I know this was more prominent in the 80s and 90s and such, but do you record much ensemble or is it more
Yeah.
individual booth work?
For example, Goof Troop was all ensemble. We are all in the studio, same time, doing it like a radio play. Now it is totally solo and really came about during COVID when we were all locked down and I had to record here from home. It's a Zoom call. It's like this director will say, okay, give me three in a row of line 8. And howdy, Mickey, let's go. Howdy, Mick, let's go. Hey, Mick, let's go. And I might try it three different ways. And they'll say, I like C. Okay, let's go on to line 16 and whatever it is. And that's basically the way it's still done. Yeah, I'm doing a couple of series right now, as a matter of fact. And yeah, we've done most of them from here, unless my son has a drumming gig or something like that, and I'll go into the studio. But it's basically the director's still on a Zoom call there generally. And so it's 6 of 1. I might as well walk down the hall here and I'm in my studio. It's
Now
a lot
just
easier.
yeah, obviously it's easier, but do you think there's something a bit lost when you're not able to bounce off each other in the same room with your fellow actors?
Absolutely. For actors, it's much easier to act and react to someone else. Now, if you're the first in the booth, as they say, and I'm doing my lines and no one else has recorded anything, yeah, it's all got to be kind of theater of the mind in there. You just kind of got to know the way Mickey would say a line and you respond to that. Otherwise, I can get a playback. Okay, well, what did Mickey say? How did he say the line before this? And they can play that and hit record, and then I just respond to it. And that's kind of like what it is ensemble, but it's just easier for them to get everybody's schedule. I can do my stuff on Monday, Mickey can do his on Tuesday, and they edit it together, and it sounds like we're right in the same room.
So recently I was speaking with Townsend Coleman. I don't know if you guys know each other, but yeah, you know Townsend, and he was telling a story about Frank Welker, and they were doing Inspector Gadget together, and I can't remember the name of the character, but it was the villain, and he was curious as to who did the voice for the villain. This was his first time reading through it, and he said, "Well, clearly it can't be Frank because he has a light voice and he's very laid back." But then when the voice came out of Frank, Townsend ruined the take by going, "Oh my God, that's you." So, do you have a situation like that where you just couldn't believe the voice that came out of one of your fellow actors?
All the time, especially on Goof Troop. And Frank Welker was one of the cast members on that. So I got to sit behind next to him for 80 some episodes of that show. And Rob Paulson, who is the nicest guy you'll ever want to meet. And I think you've had him on your
Yeah,
show.
I have.
He's just the best. And Jim Cummings and Nancy Cartwright was in it, and Welker, Dana Hill. Unfortunately, has passed away, but she did the voice of Max in that before Jason Marsden in
Hmm.
a Goofy movie. April Winchell. We had so many great actors. It was a star-studded cast. And then I'm coming in as the title star. My first series, that was a little terrifying, and I was in awe of all of them. I mean, just that's what I learned really. Okay, it is about acting. It's not as much about the characters, but you got to take these words off the page and make them real. And that's a whole separate talent than just sounding like a character.
So outside of the TV shows and the movies, you also have Kingdom Hearts, which was a huge thing when it first came out, and it still is. What was that experience of recording Goofy for a game? Was it different than say a movie or TV?
Yeah, it is a totally different, especially Kingdom Hearts is the only time that we've gone kind of backwards. It was done in Japan first and released as a video game in Japan first. So it was basically done, and we're putting in the English voices. But I am hearing the Japanese voice actor who's doing Goofy, who studied by listening to tapes of me how to do the voice, but he's speaking in Japanese, so I don't understand any of what's going on. And my job is to take that clip, and that I am looking at it on a big monitor. And okay, he's saying something like, "Come on, Sora, let's go." But he says it in Japanese, which is generally he was saying it faster than I would. It seems to be
Mm.
a quicker language. And I'm trying to do it in the same length of time, so there's very little reanimating, which is expensive. And then the book, oh God, it can be thousands of lines of dialogue, depending on what the player does. He might go off in a different direction, and there's a different scene, so you got to cover all of that. It's we do it in 4 hour shifts, if you will, or days of work, 4 hours of doing this, and then we might wait a week or two or even a month or so before we go back in and pick it up and continually do it. We didn't do it necessarily. A game doesn't really have A to Z kind of linear story. It's like line in Japanese, and you're doing the English. You don't really get the what they said beforehand. So I don't even know what the game's about generally. I can get an idea or have them explain it a little bit, but I just don't get the idea or the idea of the story as much as you would on a normal cartoon series where we record all of the dialogue first, then they animate it.
That's wild. So you were essentially just dubbing Goofy.
Yes, yes, I was dubbing my own character a little quicker than I normally do.
Is that the only time you've done dubbing work, or have you done other?
I've done other dubbing works and a lot of what's called ADR, additional dialogue recording for movies, and a lot of the Disney ones and Pixar ones and Illumination movies, like another dog I was doing was in the movie Sing. Beauty and the Beast, I was in that, but the movie had already mostly been done, but we're finding little incidental characters to add voices to. And like on Beauty and the Beast, I was a lot of the people attacking the castle toward the end of the movie. I was probably the most obscure thing I've ever done was in that movie when Gaston is singing about decorating with antlers and he throws three eggs up in the air and swallows them, and that was me. I'm eggs. So very obscure. Toy Story, I was the mission control voice for like T minus 29, 28, getting ready for launch. Little voices like that. And let's see, Monsters Inc., one of the little yellow guys that come in because the one has a sock and he brings it into the monsters world. And, a bunch of characters throughout these movies. And sometimes my son or whoever I go to the movie with go, Dad, that's you. Yeah, I guess it was. I'd forgotten I did that. So, happens a lot.
So, Bill, what would you say is the best acting advice you've received and who gave it to you?
Well, it would be again Dawes Butler, and backed up by 30 some years of acting with some of the great actors in animation, is that yes, it is acting. It is. It's a different technique. It's more like stage acting than film acting because film acting, camera's right in your face. The your eye movements and things your facial movements can send a message. You don't have that on animation. It's all in the vocal cords. So you kind of have to goose the emotion a little bit to get it across. It can sound flat if you don't do that. And that's what you had to do in stand up. I didn't know that stand up was really the best training I ever had because you got over stage fright because stand up can be brutal, especially when you're beginning. Friday night, bunch of drunk people, make me laugh, that kind of thing. It can be rough. But boy, if you can do that, you can kind of do about anything vocally, I think, because it's all easier. I've got to take two generally on a cartoon. I don't on stage.
Yeah, no safety net.
Nope.
So, have you ever had any desire to try your hand at stage acting? Have you done any plays or anything?
I have done a couple of plays. I did one. I was in a comedy group for about 8 years with Fred Willard, and he's a great comedian. And I did a play out in Upland with him. It was kind of like a Christmas story, kind of three ghosts come to him during the night. That one, and I did a play there. It's good to keep your hand in it. I should do more, but I haven't. I'm kind of sitting back these days, kind of just riding the goofy wave because we still have a lot of stuff that we're doing, and traveling a lot to Comic Cons,
Mm.
which I've been doing a lot more of the last couple of years. And that's great because you get to meet the fans and you can hear what's important to them. People come up to me all the time and say, a Goofy movie was so important to me because I didn't know my dad that well, and that became our movie. And it just became a great thing. And you hear these stories about how important these characters are. And you don't get that when you're in the booth, you're just doing lines. You don't realize the effect it has on people. But with Comic Cons and meeting the fans, and you really get a sense of what these characters and what this genre means to people.
Another movie that I grew up on that you were a part of was Casper, Spirited
Oh
Away.
yes,
You
yeah,
did
did a
the
couple of
voice of
Casper
Stinky.
movies. Yes, yeah. My wife used to say, "Yeah, I'll say that you're goofy. I won't say that you're stinky." So
Just off the top of my head, was there an established voice for Stinky? Was that the first, or you
that's
had to craft it?
yeah, that was an interesting thing because there were two different studios that did the original Casper movie was done by I think it might have been Universal, and they had a different cast than ours, which was done by Saban, and it was Casper meets Wendy and Casper: A Spirited Beginning. They're the two that I did, and so there was in a way, and the old cartoons had very a rough kind of style. Not it wasn't set in stone. I think it was pretty loosey goosey on what I could do. It had to be 100% perfect match for this voice. I could take it with it and play with it a little bit.
So, what would you say is the most challenging project that you've worked on? Is there one you lost sleep over?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it would have to be a Goofy movie because normally to do a movie like that, we did a sequel, extremely goofy movie. We recorded in about 3 or 4 days because they had it all down. Since they were kind of finding their way along the way with a Goofy movie, they were doing scenes and no, that didn't work. Let's do this and that. I was on that for over 2 years, uh,
Wow.
back and forth, and probably around 30 to 40 different days of recording on that. That's an awful lot. But we were kind of finding our way and trying things that did work, didn't work. Characters would come and go. And so it's a much different movie than what it started out to be because it started out to be a goof troop movie. There was a DuckTales movie from the series DuckTales. This was supposed to be a Goof Troop movie, but along the way, no, they didn't want to do that. And Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was in charge of that, wanted it to be a buddy buddy picture. So it took a left turn and kind of went in that direction. And as they wrote this, we would record things, and then they'd go, "Nah, that doesn't work. This does. We're kind of going in this direction." So it kind of changed directions quite a bit during the production of that movie. Was that I lost some sleep on that, especially when they wanted me to do my own voice.
Mm. Sorry if you mentioned this before, but was the Goofy movie, was that ensemble?
It was and wasn't. Jason Marsden, Goofy's son, Max, I did many days where I was recording back and forth with him on our dialogue. But then I would also come in and do sometimes the same lines without Jason, and he would without me. And which ones they used in the movie, I'm not really sure. But they were just trying different things. It was experimentation. But most movies, I would say, are pretty much solo projects, even back then to a degree.
Mm. Well, Bill, I like to wind down with this question here. Have you ever had an experience that you would consider supernatural, paranormal, or an event you can't explain?
Oh my gosh. Probably getting the role of Goofy.
Yeah, that fits.
That was the odds are so much against an actor in LA. There are 250, roughly 250,000 Screen Actors Guild members in LA. On any given week, there's about 10,000 jobs, roughly. So that means on any given week, there's 240,000 out of work actors. The odds are incredible. I didn't know that when I first came here. I just wanted to go to Hollywood and get in the movies. And I want to do that. That's cool. I had no idea what would happen, and I realized the miracle that was getting that audition. Another one was getting a television series called It's a Dog's Life on Disney Plus. I always loved dogs, animated or real. I love dogs. We wrote up an idea for a TV series and sold it on day one, our first meeting with Disney. And it wasn't because I was the voice of Goofy or probably helped us get the interview, but they loved what we had so much. They said, yes, we want to do that. That doesn't happen really. Mostly it's you come back, you adjust things. Oh, let's try this, or can we get a different host, or whatever they want. You come back and modify the pitch. They loved our pitch. That doesn't happen. And that day we got to sell the series. And see, to date, only one I've helped produce as well as hosted. And yeah, we did 20 stories in 11 states in 5 months. And so we were on the road a lot during 2019 and went on the air in 20 and was on for like 3 or 4 years. And then they pulled it. And we're hoping they'll do a second season sometime. But
Well,
it's not that easy, I found since then. We pitched other things, nothing. But that one, first time, right out of the gate, boom, hit a home run.
do you have any dogs now?
Yes, I do. One's running around here now, the same Skipper, and he's a year and a half old, and he's got around 10 things in him. He's like American Bully, Chihuahua, Maltese, Poodle, uh, French bulldog, regular bulldog, pit bulldog. He's got a lot of bully in him.
You know, my wife and I, we have 3 dogs and 7 cats, so we're animal lovers as well. They're all over the place.
Yeah, and we got another dog going to be coming here December middle. She's getting fixed right now, a rescue that we'll be bringing into our house in about a month. This is a
Wow,
friend for Skipper.
that's great. So, you seen any good movies lately? It doesn't have to be a horror movie, but if it is, that's bonus points.
I've been working so much, I haven't really had a time to see anything I want to see Wicked, really. That's my next one that I'm going to see. And it's just finding the time. This week's pretty open because of Thanksgiving and everything. So probably this week we'll probably see Wicked.
Good, good. So just to put a bow on this thing here, Bill, what's on the horizon? Is there anything you want to share? Any shows? Anything? Without getting in trouble, without breaking any
Yeah.
NDAs?
Well, like I say, the Thanksgiving Day parade, I'll be in that. Usually a New Year's thing, definitely around Christmas. There are some stop motion animation shorts that we've done that will be out, which we did at Stupid Buddy Studios. I did some robot chickens, and that's studios where they're animating Mickey and everything. We had one called Mickey's Very Many Christmases, which will be coming out on Disney Plus, I believe, or Disney Channel during the month of December and everything. So, yeah, several Christmas things are coming out. And and I think they've announced it, another kind of incarnation of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse for the little people. And we're already in the second season of recording that. So it'll be coming out pretty soon.
Awesome. Well, Bill, thank you so much for giving me some of your time. I had a great time chatting with you.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And thanks so much. And if Goofy was here, he'd probably say, Gorsh, thanks again, too.